Good morning. I am not Andrea Barnes. You may have noticed because my hair is slightly shorter. My name is Jeff Phillip. I am one of the trustees on your board of trustees, and I'd like to welcome you all this morning to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church on a beautiful, not quite rainy morning compared to yesterday, which had some precipitation. I want to call your attention to a few things this morning. One is that directly after our service, Rod Kempkes and Carolyn Kempkes will be sharing their exploits in Norway earlier this year. So please feel free to grab some coffee. We'll rearrange the chairs and then kind of explore a little bit and do some virtual traveling to Norway afterwards. Another thing to keep in mind is that we are going to be providing, through community loaves, nutritional bread and cookies for people in need. This is an opportunity for you to bake or contribute to the preparation of nutritional bread and cookies. You can prepare them at home following some recipes, or there will be a baking event on the 18th here at Webster Hall. There's a sign-up sheet on the back table. It's pretty much the only thing on that back table, so you won't miss it when you go back there to sign up. And welcome.
It is good to return to a familiar place and familiar friendly faces. For many people, travel can be a spiritual exploration, offering new perspectives on ourselves, as well as opportunities to connect to other people, other cultures, and the natural world. Whether we enjoy armchair travel, walking outdoors, or journeying to distant locations, we can find inspiration in new vistas. So today, Jeff and I offer some musings of our journey towards Albuquerque, visiting the iconic national parks of the Southwest along the way. The amazement that comes with seeing a geological wonder for the first time, the joy that comes with still having beginner's mind at the age of 60, the reminder that we view our world and our experiences through a Unitarian Universalist lens. Welcome to our little journey.
Nancy and I were fortunate enough to be able to take all the time we needed recently to travel, explore, and experience places that we had never been to before. I want to thank the fates, God, the great mystery, good fortune or good planning or whatever force that brought us to a place where we could do so. I'm keenly aware that we are privileged to be able to take time off for months at a time, to have the finances to pay for these trips, and to have the physical and mental capacity to go to the places we've been and see the things that we have seen. So thank you, Universe.
Come, let us worship. And now please enjoy the prelude performed by Peter Spencer. Thank you, Peter. Sometimes, during a journey or upon returning home, the act of exiting out of our day-to-day existence can help us to step back and see both ourselves and others with a fresh set of eyes. When we visit neighbors, friends, family, or completely new cultures, Whether close to home or at a distance, we have the chance to open ourselves to hearing what is important to others, what their struggles are, and how they deal with problems. This can help us find new parts of ourselves and can offer us fresh ways to look at problems and when I was in my 40s, raising 3 young children with Jeff, I belonged to a women's group, much like the covenant groups we currently have here at Cedars. We traded off leading sessions, and one of the leaders suggested we present one of our most memorable trips. This was an easy assignment for most of the women. They had all traveled to destinations near and far, and one had actually spent a year of international study in Italy during college. I remember the presentations as being well put together and the stories fun to hear since these are all women that I adored. When it was my turn to present, I passed. You see, with the exception of a 2-week honeymoon in the Caribbean, I hadn't done a whole lot of traveling yet, and I felt embarrassed and inferior to all these worldly women. One of the women suggested that I share my journey of parenthood, but it's not the same. So, see, I grew up in a family that took the same summer trip to the beach every year with 2 other families. It was super fun. It was familiar. We looked forward to these summer vacations where we went clam digging, played all day at the beach, and lost ourselves in multiple magical ocean and beach adventures. And that's what we kids did. I have no idea what the adults did. I don't care either. Now, this traveling situation for me changed a bit when I was invited into Jeff's family and officially became a Philip. He looks worried. Jeff grew up RVing with his family to places around the country I'd only heard about, or maybe seen on a sitcom in the 70s. His family also took semi-regular trips to Mexico and Hawaii. So I knew when I married him that we would eventually travel for recreation. But first, we started a family. We lived hours from both of our families, so we packed up the minivan and went either east or north to one of our families for each major holiday. We also had a huge Phillip family campout with Jeff's dad, brother, and sister and their families every Memorial Day to celebrate our daughter's May birthdays. So we had a lot of traveling in our young family years, but it was mostly travel to Seattle and Portland to see our families and an occasional camping trip. Also fun. One of the first things I noticed about being in a traveling family, one that travels a lot, is you get really good at packing and knowing what to take and what to leave behind. I noticed as my kids grew older, they had all 3 become naturally good at throwing together the necessities for their trips away from home, both with the family and for school and sports trips. This is a muscle that I had to develop in adulthood, and I'm glad they acquired that skill early on. So despite being a late bloomer in the travel category, by the time the kids were in middle and high school, we were able to finally take some fun trips, both as a family and as a couple. Some of the more memorable trips we took as a family were to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. We took a trip to Salt Lake City for GA in 2009. It was the GA where they had introduced Standing on the Side of Love, which we now call Side with Love. And on the way, we explored Yellowstone. So that was a really cool trip for our family. So, despite that awkward moment when I felt serious FOMO because I hadn't done any traveling, I'm okay now. I've caught up. We've traveled outside of the country and through many different states and regions for pleasure. Work trips don't count. My biggest takeaway from this most recent extended trip that we just took, that we got back from, and our retirement trip to Alaska back in August is this: traveling is much more carefree and enjoyable when you're not going back to work upon your return. It's like you're living in an entirely different, non-urgent mindset. I find it very freeing, and as a result, much easier to stay grounded in the moment rather than thinking about all the responsibilities I'll be returning to. Jeff and I discuss this a lot with our friends and colleagues, especially when people ask him if he misses working. Newsflash, he doesn't. I dedicate the chalice lighting to the real voyage of discovery, which consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Please join me in reciting the affirmation, which is printed in your order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because we are one family, to take good care of the earth, because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. Now join us for our opening hymn, Blue Boat Home, 1064. Remember to place your masks on your face.
All right, everyone. We will be singing 3 verses of Blue Boat Home, and Peter Spencer will be leading us in. I'll set you off, Peter. Oh, we'll give people a moment to flip. I feel no motion standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my drive and north and south. I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep. Drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, for making our way through the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me. Hail the great winds urging me on. Reach the infinite sea before me. Sing the sky my sailor's song. I've been upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Set this down over here. Good morning, everyone. That was a gorgeous hymn. I always love that one. And it fits today's subject perfectly. On our blue boat home, we do travel. Isn't that right? And it's through the lens of a UU, specifically these two UUs. But you and you are also UUs. So when you travel, you see the world through a lens of a UU. That was pretty easy to follow, right? Well, today's topic is traveling. Put simply, I think we've all traveled a bit in our lives. And if you haven't left the country or the state, well, you traveled point A, point B here. So I assume you have a little travel experience in your life. Well, we're hearing about Jeff and Nancy's travels today, but I think it's important to recognize everyone's experiences, and I think today we need a little help from our good friend, the vessel. Who remembers the vessel? 1, 2, 3. Well, it's okay, because I have it. I brought it. I left it? No. Is it under? Oh my goodness, I left it under a chair. That's pretty silly of me. Ugh. Yeah, no, it slips away from you, and sometimes I loan it out, but here it is, the vessel. We've seen this 2 times before in the past. We saw this a couple months ago when we were using our imaginations to create different things, and we actually turned this into, I believe, some food items. There was a large anchor that was created. Glad the floor wasn't damaged, but this is a powerful, powerful vessel. This vessel today has the special power of feeding your travel bug. So, how this is going to work is I am going to take the vessel and I'm going to say my favorite place to travel. So, my favorite place to travel would be the Enchanted Forest in Oregon, I believe. It's a theme park, it's great. But that's my favorite place. So I put energy into the vessel, and then I receive energy back. And now I'm that much closer to dropping everything and going to the Enchanted Forest in Oregon. Stay tuned. But now, this vessel needs to feed and be fed. So, when I pass you the vessel, please say your favorite place to travel or a place you have traveled recently. Let's go to, well, I know someone. Where have you been, Rod? Any place above the tree line. I love it. Whoop. Joanna caught it.
For some reason, this Blue Springs, Florida came to mind. Beautiful place to go swimming, see the clear water boiling up. Blue Springs near Gainesville, Florida.
Blue Springs, Gainesville, Florida. Great place to swim. Fran, it's you.
My favorite place to travel is Maui, Hawaii.
Maui. I think a lot of us might be able to relate. All right. Oh. We caught it over here.
Yes. Amelia.
Yes. Texas. All right. Oh, and I think
Rangeley, Maine.
Rangeley, Maine. Oh, okay. Mary.
New Zealand.
New Zealand. We're getting further and further away now. We have some very, very good travelers here. Oh. Chicago and New York. Japan. Even farther. We've almost made it back to ourselves now. Okay, Japan. Wow, this vessel is brimming with travel bug energy. Does anyone need some travel bug energy here? Mary?
Maris,
Marrowstone Island? I've never been there. I'm going to have to look it up. Oh, Fort Flagler. All right. Paris, France. Ooh la la. I'm getting a lot of good ideas, and the vessel is getting a lot of good energy. Well, I hope everyone who caught the vessel got a little travel bug energy. Maybe it's itched a little bit. Maybe you're already on your phone booking your next flight. Jim's on phone? No. But this vessel just proves something. You just have to think of what you enjoy, and it might pull you closer to it. Of course, this vessel is a thing with weight, and we can all see it, and it definitely gave us that travel bug energy. But please, think about the last time you traveled, where you went, where you wanted to go, where you want to go right now. Just keep it considered as we listen to Jeff and Nancy describe their travels. Thank you very much, everyone. And if you need the vessel, I'll have it, and anyone can borrow it. Now, Peter, would you play us a little tune as we lead the kids out for Chalice Saplings? A little interlude, if you would. And now is the portion of service where all of the children today will follow me and our volunteer, Kasha Singh, and we will retreat to Chalice Saplings. So I'll get off the mic now.
Please join me in a moment of quiet reflection, which I will follow with a quote by Rebecca Solnit. You travel to get somewhere, and you travel for the sake of adventure, for the scenery, for being in motion, for discovery, for being uprooted and at large. That nice expression that seems to suggest that liberty is an enlargement of the self, that you grow as your scope does. But maybe the final art of travel is arrival, the end of the story that eludes so many of us who are afloat or adrift, who believe there should be, must be, something next. In a way, everything is traveling. The planet, revolving daily, orbiting the sun annually, the blood traveling within our veins, the ideas traveling within our minds. Maybe being still is how you turn your attention from the logistics of your own trajectory to the passage of all the other beings in their shadows. To arrive, then, is not about immobility, but something else, perhaps confidence, clarity, satisfaction, attention. Joys and sorrows. I don't see a joy and sorrow bowl here, but I am going to have you come up and share your name and your joy or your sorrow, and we'll simply hold it in our hearts collectively. And I also want to let everybody here know that the joys and sorrows are not recorded or live streamed, so this is an internal event. So please come forward, let us know your name and your joy and your sorrow. Now, before I go, please join us in singing Come Sing a Song with Me, hymn number 346. Remember to don your mask. The enduring lesson of travel, especially when you travel to the same location multiple times over time, is that change is inevitable. Geological change, glacial change, climate change. They are not visible to the naked eye, but they take place nonetheless. And we can witness and accept the changes over decades, if we choose to. The best way to lean into change is to accept that everything around us is in a constant state of flux. If you want to effect the change or change something to meet goals that are important to you and your family, as the saying goes, be the change you want to see. In order to be the change, first, it is necessary to fund the change. Because, as sure as I'm standing right here, there will be change at Cedars. Good change. Change that we can lean into. If you're visiting us for the first time, as the collection baskets pass you by, please feel free to let them pass. We are simply happy to have you here as our guest. Will the ushers please come forward for the collection? Thank you. Thank you for your gifts. As Jeff and I traveled through the Southwest, we kept coming up with conversations that made us think about the 7 principles. So, we're going to share our musings today based on the 7 principles. Principle number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. When traveling, you exit your regular, predictable circles and venture out of your familiar routines and comfort zones. We visited several national parks and monuments in Utah and Arizona, Zion, Arches, Bryce Canyon, which isn't a canyon, but the name stuck, so they tell us, and the Grand Canyon. And these are all first visits for me, so I was pretty dazzled. We also visited Mesa Verde in Colorado and Bandelier Park in New Mexico. Those are also first visits for me and for Jeff. Both of these parks featured well-preserved cliff dwellings, Pueblo villages, and kivas. As we read the histories of the original inhabitants of these lands in the visitor centers and on the trails, it became crystal clear that these lands were acquired by brute force, which can only be accomplished by dehumanizing the inhabitants that needed to be displaced. We've known this for a long time, but the narrative of the indigenous as savages and inferior humans in need of civil reformation still exists in our modern zeitgeist. Visiting these incredible places, I'm grateful that the National Park Service has spent untold resources restoring and preserving these historic sites and has carefully rewritten the historical narrative to honor the living traditions of those who were here first, and thus restoring their worth and dignity. Back to the first principle. We have both Jeff and I, have been fascinated by the cliff houses and kivas that the ancestral Pueblo dwellers built below and inside of these massive cliffs. They're really cool. We visited several of these sites on briskly cold days and couldn't help but marvel at what it took to stay warm for them, compiling enough pelts for the village inhabitants, gathering enough firewood to keep a fire for cooking and warmth, developing systems of travel and materials transport up and down the cliffs to sustain the families who lived in these intricate dwellings. When you're standing so close to these ancient sites with nobody else around, because we were there in the off-season and so there were not that many visitors, I feel fortunate that we were there by ourselves. It gives me pause to imagine the hardships of this long-lost era. Principle number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. One of the towns we stayed in for 2 nights was Kanab, Utah. It's a fun town to stop over in when you're traveling from Bryce Canyon to Grand Canyon. The tourism of Kanab places an emphasis on all the old westerns that were filmed in this area and the classic 50s hotels that John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and many others stayed in. As we visited museums, stores, and in the lobby of our hotel, I kept seeing this sign reminding folks to be kind in various messages and in various ways. I came to find out that this was a campaign that was called Be Kind to Kanab, and it was born from a need to inspire the influx of out-of-state visitors to tread lightly on the priceless historical sites they were visiting and to be nice to each other and the Kanab hospitality workers who waited on them and hosted them in their hometown. Things had been getting a little out of hand in Kanab with so many out-of-town visitors, with littering, vandalism, and treatment of others. This campaign was funded by a grant, and from what I could tell, it was a successful campaign. We had a really wonderful time in Kanab. We didn't experience any of this lack of kindness that they were encouraging us to remember to do. And we just had a lovely time. Now I'm going to share my assumption about this campaign and its message before I kind of researched it and looked it up. I'll also add that we were passing through Kanab in late October before the election that was predicted to bring a red wave. I thought that because this town was the last town out of Utah before you enter Arizona, that this remember to be kind message might be aimed at Arizonans coming over into the sweet little Utah town of Kanab. So I had this idea about what it was like in Arizona built up in my head. But I was wrong. Arizona's not a scary red place where the first person you meet will be wearing a bandana of the Confederate flag around their neck, sporting an American flag on a tall pole on their truck. It's just not that simple. People are people. Some are nice, some aren't. And we met wonderful folks during our time in Arizona and in every state. We became fellow pilgrims with all the other park visitors, acting as photographers for each other, and patiently pausing for people to take their once-in-a-lifetime photos of the Grand Canyon. And people paused for us as well and helped us take our photos. It's a matter of expecting people to be nice to each other, and they will be. Fellow travelers respecting both similarities and differences. And it's easier than you might think. Just love without judgment. Third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We were in Albuquerque for 1 month visiting our eldest daughter, Marina. Over this time, we visited the Albuquerque UU Church 3 times. I'm not sure it's called the Albuquerque UU Church. Might be First Unitarian, but can't remember at the moment. We met some of the worship associates, and we chatted with them. I talked with one of the 3 ministers, and she said to say hi to Patricia and Dick. This is a huge church. It's a really beautiful church with a full-fledged campus, multiple buildings, security on Sunday, and several well-attended affinity groups, including a young adult group that meets for coffee before work once a month. Marina may or may not join this group in the near or distant future. She did meet one of the members of this young adult group and sounded interested. She became a member of the young adult group in Urbana-Champaign when she was at their church during grad school. So Jeff and I, we felt right at home participating in the Halloween Sunday, the honoring of our ancestors ritual, and singing the hymns that we knew by heart. This congregation was 2/3 into their stewardship campaign and made several calls from the pulpit while we were there. It was good to see. It all felt familiar and somehow safe. I was impressed. This church is good at fostering growth, both spiritual and financially. It's a good role model. And the fourth principle of free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I keep returning to the American history lessons we learned or were reminded of while we were journeying through the Southwest. These lessons sit dormant in our consciousness, but they come to the surface when we are faced with these stories. If we are free to find our truths, are they universal truths? Is my truth a universal truth? This question is important right now in the United States, with two distinct and opposing political narratives at play. There are those who may rebuff at the heavy emphasis on native sovereignty, but in order to repair the narrative about how this country was built, we need to correct the still widely accepted and taught story based on manifest destiny and work towards reparation to the indigenous communities of this country and tell the truth of what really happened to create the United States of America, emphasizing what was lost in the process. Your turn.
The fifth principle of Unitarian Universalism, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Part of our journey was learning about the people who lived in the Southwest desert for thousands of years. Just on the edge of Albuquerque is Petroglyph National Monument. Planning a day hiking out into the desert started with an orientation at the visitor center, where we learned that there are literally thousands of petroglyphs just in the backyard of the Albuquerque residential areas that was moving out into the petroglyph areas and was thankfully protected. Those petroglyphs date back as far as 700 years, left for unknown purposes by the ancestral Puebloans. By the way, the term that I learned to describe those people in the New Mexico Southwest area was the Anasazi. One of the things that you find out when you're traveling is you learn and you adapt, and what we learned is that the term Anasazi actually means ancient enemy in Navajo. So there is a change that's been going on for the past 20 or 30 years of replacing that term with ancestral Puebloans to recognize and honor that these are the ancestors of the modern Pueblo peoples. So just something that we learned. Anyway, so we learn about these people traveling through these lands from hundreds of years ago and how they used the area to place clan or directional markers, and how trade in the area brought items from Central America or the Great Plains. There were petroglyphs of macaw birds, parrots, right, from Central America that had been brought in. Well, as we're getting ready to go on our hike to go around that area, and we're in the parking lot getting our stuff ready, and some random woman comes up to us and says, are you planning on being on the highway after 1 o'clock? Because everything is going to be shut down. And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, maybe. And she said, oh yeah, President Biden is coming through town for the Democratic rally in advance of the election. And so she kind of tells us, you know, they're going to shut down all the highways and everything as the motorcade comes through. And so Nancy and I looked at each other and we're thinking, you know, the petroglyphs will probably be here in a few days. So maybe we'll just change our plans, and which is another thing when you're traveling, be flexible, right? So we get online and we get because you have to get tickets so that you can gain entry. So we stopped our little excursion out to the petroglyphs, got our tickets, headed over to a community center in Albuquerque and got in a long line. We were not able to get inside of the community center where this rally was occurring. So we were outside. But we were able to hear from some very visionary politicians from New Mexico that we weren't really aware of, but were very impressive, from the mayor of Albuquerque, representatives, state representatives, the governor, and President Biden, who, before he goes on stage inside the community center, there's like this big ruckus, and we're standing outside, there's a Jumbotron, and we're watching everything on stage. And all of a sudden, the Jumbotron is like off kilter for some reason. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And you can kind of see this Secret Service moving in. And President Biden and the governor of New Mexico comes walking out on this platform outside to greet all the people who couldn't get inside because it was too full. It was kind of an amazing opportunity to hear from our politicians that are in the current election, to hear from President Biden, and to be, not very far away, just maybe 100 feet away from him, and to experience that in New Mexico that seemed positive, and yet nearby in the state of Arizona, you probably heard that things were not very positive. There was a lot of intimidation at the polling places, people sitting outside in trucks with weapons. And it's a stark contrast to see that democratic process occur in a state like New Mexico versus one that was occurring in Arizona. And I was thankful we were in New Mexico, and if you want to, you can kind of look up why these two places that have similar economies, similar climates, are so very, very different politically. So that was unexpected, and just kind of remarkable to experience the energy in a rally like that we hadn't really been there before. So yeah, election season. We kind of dropped ourselves in the middle of that. The sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We are part of a larger Unitarian Universalist community, and I thoroughly enjoy meeting people who share my values and perhaps celebrate or interpret them slightly differently. We attended the First Unitarian Church of Albuquerque. One of the things that they do at that church is that they are exploring the eighth principle of Unitarian Universalism. This is something that's come about more recently to talk about the injustices of racial oppression and other oppressions in our country and in the world at large. It came up at the General Assembly in 2017 to introduce the idea of maybe adding another principle to the 7 principles that we already have. That eighth proposed principle, as it's out there right now, is we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Living in our local communities and being so close to the issue of our congregation, sometimes I lose track of these larger issues that are coming about. But finding myself in a different congregation, I expanded my perception of what was going on. And I think that the eighth principle movement is trying to be more descriptive of addressing oppression, and it touches on many of the seven principles. It's not separate from them as I see it. The Unitarian Universalist Association is re-examining the seven principles right now through a commission reviewing Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. They have drafted a proposal replacing the principles with a set of values. This process goes through, it's a very bureaucratic process. I used to work for the federal government, so I know all about bureaucracies. But there's this commission looking at reevaluating how Article 2 that addresses our purposes and principles, which is now, as proposed, focusing on purposes and values. And those values form around the central theme of love and include justice, generosity, evolution, pluralism, equity, and interdependence. I don't know how this change will be received at General Assembly this coming year, but it's certain to stir things up. So keep an eye out, if you can, to see how that evolves, changing how we perceive ourselves and our faith certainly raises a lot of emotions. And the seventh principle, respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are a part. I often look at the seventh principle as one that connects us to the environment, though that interdependent web connects us to really everything. Our travels in the Southwest were in our Kia Sorento. It doesn't get great gas mileage. We traveled about 6,000 miles on that car. It was a lot of driving, a lot of long days. With side trips and over mountain passes and across rivers and long stretches through deserts. Even cruising along Route 66, where there's this one place where you can drive along Route 66 and it plays America the Beautiful through your car. It's very interesting. Interestingly, the people in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, didn't know about this thing that was just outside of town. So, which is a reminder, go to local places, because there's a lot of great things to see. So, you know, we're learning that our travels change things like the climate because of the impact that we have. I looked at our carbon footprint for this travel. What was our impact directly on the earth, on the plants, on the animals? Our impact in a positive way of sharing our experiences so people could appreciate the places that we've been to and the things that we've seen and the people that we've met. As I'm looking, the 6,000 miles equated to about 1.9 metric tons of carbon dioxide. As I added the trip that we took over the summer to Alaska, which it was a 3-day Alaska ferry trip, 1.76 metric tons, an 8-day cruise, 4.69 metric tons of carbon dioxide, rental of a car, which I rented a Tesla, so much less impact, had more impact on my own anxiety because I didn't know where all the chargers were, and that was new. And then flights within Alaska and back home equated to about 10 metric tons of carbon. That's about the same that our entire household uses in electricity throughout a whole year. What does this mean? I don't know. I know that my generation grew up with our parents who had come out of World War II, and the growth of auto transportation and flight transportation allowed them to explore and to travel a lot. That was a new thing, and they took us, and so it created, for me, the expectation of travel without regard for Like, what was the impact on the earth? Other than, I was a Boy Scout, so like, leave no trace. So, we cleaned up after ourselves. But I don't know what this means for the future of travel. I certainly am thinking about that more and more, and thinking about the fact that I should learn about things in my own backyard, which has less of an impact and are equally interesting. Younger generations are thinking more about the impact of travel, and I want to be conscious of that and think about how my choices are impacting the planet. So our travels contribute to climate change, and they also help us understand and better appreciate the lands and cultures and other people. Yet I still have that wanderlust that I grew up with. I want to go to new places and see new things that I've never seen before, and experiences with people that I haven't met before. So for now, Nancy and I will keep on traveling and keeping that interconnected web in mind. But I'll leave you with this. Travel, whether it's near or far, go someplace. And as Archer mentioned earlier, just come in here, you're traveling a little bit. But get to know places near or far. Take in your surroundings. Slow down. Use your senses to experience where you are. Consider your impact on the earth, and be kind along the way.
In 2019, my sister and I had the opportunity to make an ancestral visit to Norway to visit the eldest elder of our family, my mother's last living cousin, and all of his adult children. They all live in Ålesund on a peninsula named after our family, Flisnes. My maternal grandfather grew up on this land, and my maternal grandmother grew up on the Flydal farm, which is in the Geiranger region about an hour's distance away from Ålesund. We found connections to other Flydals and Flisneses and traveled from Bergen all the way up to Kirkenes at the far north point of Norway, visiting cousins along the way. It was the most amazing trip. I hope that you stay after church and join Rod Kempkes and Carolyn Kempkes as they share their journey from last summer hiking across Norway and probably passing along some of the places we passed. It'll be in the library at 11:15. Oh, it's going to be right here. Sorry. There's the projector, there's the screen. So at 11:15, just sit down and enjoy Rod's presentation. And remember, be a tourist in your own backyard so that you can find out about the things that people who visit tell you about. And never forget, all who wander are not lost. Amen. Namaste. Blessed be. Now please join us for our closing hymn, 1008 in the Teal hymnal, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Please don your masks, rise as you're willing and able, and we will, I believe, sing 2 verses. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each other,
Please repeat after me as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So go out into the world, travel near or far, but don't remember to come back here. Join us for the postlude.